Hello. In 1941, thousands of young American Marines invaded the beaches of the Pacific Islands to do battle with the occupying Japanese forces. One of those young Marines is the subject of tonight's film. His name was Ed Wood Jr., writer, director, actor and raconteur. Apparently, one of Ed Wood Jr.'s favourite stories is to tell of how he was dressed for that invasion. He claims that underneath his army uniform, he was wearing a pink bra and knickers.
This is the most fantastic story I've ever heard.
And every word of it's true, too.
That's the fantastic part of it.
Ed Wood Jr. died in 1978, a few days after being evicted from his Hollywood home. Fortune hadn't smiled on him for some time. He was drinking heavily and virtually broke, and he hadn't made a movie in nearly 20 years. His death went largely unnoticed. Yet today, his films aroused tremendous interest and enthusiasm. He was someone who can truly be called a cult director, thanks largely to such unforgettable movies as this one, his low-budget science fiction extravaganza, Plan 9 from Outer Space.
I mean, first of all, you look at an Ed Wood film, and you know that you're watching an Ed Wood film. You couldn't confuse it with the work of any other filmmaker. It's like a Fellini film or a Bergman film or a movie by Frank Capra. He has a very distinctive, absolutely unusual style.
I mean, you can't compare something like a Plan 9 from Outer Space to any other filmmaker. At least no filmmaker that I know of. He was completely unique. He was a stylist and definitely a total individual.
Take any fire, any earthquake, any major disaster, then wonder. Flying saucers, Captain, are still a rumor, officially.
Looks like we beat them off again, sir.
What do they want? Where are they from? Where are they going?
Initially, the Ed Wood revival was due to him being voted the worst director of all time. But whether you love them or hate them, you can't deny his films are certainly strange and unique, as was the life of Ed Wood Jr. And this is Ed Wood Jr. himself, as is best remembered from his very first film.
My mind's in a muddle, like in a thick fog. I can't make sense to myself sometimes.
Ed's first film was released in 1953 and is best known as Glen or Glenda. But it was actually released under several different titles. Glen or Glenda, Which Is It? He or She? I Changed My Sex, I Led Two Lives, and even The Transvestite, which should give you a pretty good idea as to the subject matter.
Why is the modern world shocked by this headline? Why? Once, not so very long ago, the people of the world were saying,
airplanes. Why?
nature makes mistakes. It's proven every day. This person is a transvestite, a man who is more comfortable wearing girls' clothes. The term transvestite is the name given by medical science to those persons who wear the clothing of the opposite sex.
I thought I could stop wearing these things. I tried, honestly, I tried. I haven't had a stitch of them on for nearly 2 weeks until tonight. Then I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to put them on or go out of my mind.
Give this man satin undies, a dress, a sweater, and a skirt, or even the lounging outfit he has on, and he's the happiest individual in the world.
It cost just $29,000 and was financed by George Weiss, a producer of sexploitation pictures. Ed was the writer, director and star. But far from being just another crass exploitation film, it's actually an intensely personal statement.
Glen is engaged to be married to Barbara, a lovely, intelligent girl. The problem, Glenda, Glen's other self. The girl that he himself is, his other individual personality.
Actually, in Glen or Glenda, I wasn't allowed on the set. I didn't know the whole story of him dressing in women's clothes. I didn't find that out till later. Because Edward wanted to marry me, and so he didn't let me know, you know, that he was dressing in drag.
Then there was the time Barbara was wearing the sweater Glen had always wanted to feel on his own body. It was becoming an obsession to him. He must have...
What's the matter, Glen, darling?
I guess I was daydreaming.
Something seems to be troubling you. Why don't you tell me?
He'd want to borrow my Angora sweater, and I asked why, because it wasn't the usual thing for a man to be asking a woman. He said that it made him feel more comfortable, that it made his creative juices flow. So I went along with it.
Glen has decided to tell Barbara of his dual personality. Tell her of the nighties and negligees, the sweaters and skirts, the robes and dresses, the stockings and the high-heeled shoes. Then, when it is all over and that much of the story he knows is told, Barbara is not sure of her own thoughts.
Sometimes you take a person, what they are inside, and the good that they do for others and everything, and not just, sometimes they can't help what they feel. I questioned it, but I went along with it.
But in real life, Ed was not so honest with his fiancée. After the collapse of his relationship with Dolores Fuller, he courted and married Norma McCarthy. Now, of course, before he was married to you, he'd made Glen or Glenda. Had you seen that movie before you met him?
No, I hadn't. Isn't that funny? Well, I guess I just didn't go see movies like that, or not that it was anything wrong with it, but if I went to see a movie in those days, it was some big movie, you know, that had a lot of advertising.
Had he spoken to you about making Glen or Glenda at all?
No. I didn't know that he, you know, was a transfer site. I didn't know that until about 6, 7 weeks or so after we were married.
Are you forgetting about my other self?
You'll have to tell her, of course.
Yeah. I have to tell her. But when? Before? Or after?
I didn't understand. So I moved. I understand those things now, but I had 2 boys, and I just didn't, I'm from a strict family, and I saw I can't understand this. And as I told you earlier, all my friends said, of all people for it to happen to Dixie, it had to be you, you know, you don't understand those things. But I understand it.
Glen or Glenda also features a bizarre appearance by the aging Hollywood horror star Bela Lugosi, whom Ed had befriended.
Well, Wood was always a Bela Lugosi fan, and he, of course, watched his films in the 30s and the 40s and grew up on them. And so when he had the chance to work with Bela Lugosi, he jumped at it. And actually, Wood was the only one who really used Lugosi in his last years.
As well as Bela, another regular feature of Ed's films was his extensive use of stock footage.
Wood always relied on stock footage. Apparently, he could get it somewhat inexpensively. And, I mean, when you look at Glen or Glenda, suddenly Bela Lugosi's yelling, pull the string, and there are a bunch of buffalo stampeding down his face.
Mistakes made. A story must be told.
Ed loved horror pictures. That was his favorite type of film. And the fact that they were so close to each other, they just loved one another as friends. And Bela wanted to help Eddie. And it was his last years of his life, and I think he wanted very much to help him.